Have you ever noticed that the noses of ancient statues are broken? Walk through the Met, the British Museum, the Cairo Museum, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, it doesn't matter. The nose is gone. And for a long time, the explanation was simple. These things are thousands of years old. Erosion, accidents, time. Except researchers started noticing something uncomfortable. The damage is almost always the nose, almost never the ears, the chin, the forehead, just the nose. Across civilizations that never spoke to each other. That's not erosion. That's a pattern. And somebody made it. And honestly, the time and erosion explanation makes sense on the surface. These statues are sometimes 3,000-4,000 years old. Of course things break. Of course pieces go missing. Most of us walk past them in museums and don't think twice. But here's what changes everything. When archaeologists started cataloging the damage systematically, they found the same thing over and over again. It wasn't random. Statues that were otherwise perfectly preserved, intact hands, intact faces, intact bodies, were missing specifically the nose. Something targeted was happening, and it was happening across Egypt, across Greece, across Rome, independently, simultaneously, which means the real question was never, why are the noses broken? The real question is, why the nose? To understand why, you have to start in ancient Egypt, and you have to understand something that most of us raised in the modern world find genuinely difficult to grasp. The Egyptians did not see statues as decoration. They were not art, they were vessels. When an Egyptian sculptor carved the likeness of a pharaoh or a deity, they believed they were creating a physical home for that person's ka, their life force, their spiritual double. The statue wasn't a representation of the person. In a very real sense, it was the person. And the ka needed to breathe. The nose was the entry point for breath, for life itself. Which means if you wanted to kill the spirit inhabiting a statue, if you wanted to make it uninhabitable, you didn't need to smash the whole thing. You just needed to destroy the nose. It was surgical, it was precise, it was intentional, and when the Brooklyn Museum began cataloging Egyptian artifacts with this in mind, the pattern became undeniable. Statues with intact bodies, intact faces, missing specifically the nose. This wasn't damage. This was a very deliberate act of spiritual assassination. But ancient Egypt wasn't alone. Thousands of miles away, centuries later, the Roman Empire arrived at almost exactly the same conclusion, through a completely different route. When a Roman emperor was assassinated, overthrown, or declared an enemy of the state, the Senate could issue what was called Damnatio Memoriae, condemnation of memory. It was an official political decree, and what it meant in practice was systematic. His name was removed from public records, his coins were melted down, and his statues were destroyed or defaced, and the face was always the primary target. Because the face is how we recognize someone. Destroy the face and you destroy the person's presence in public memory. The nose, the most protruding, most defining feature of any face, went first, always. Because without it, a statue becomes unrecognizable. It becomes nobody. And that was precisely the point. The Romans weren't vandals, they were doing something far more calculated, performing an official erasure, deciding as a matter of state policy that a person had never existed. Here's what I keep coming back to. Egypt and Rome never spoke to each other. They had completely different beliefs about death, about power, about what happens after we're gone. And yet both of them, independently, chose the same thing to destroy. Not the hands, not the eyes, the nose. And maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe it tells us something we already know instinctively. That the nose is what makes a face uniquely someone. Identical twins share almost everything, but not the nose. It is the most individual thing about a human face. Egypt understood that spiritually. Rome understood it politically. And both use that knowledge the same way to unmake a person, to turn someone into nobody, which means what you're looking at when you see a broken nose in a museum isn't vandalism. It isn't erosion. It's the evidence of someone who understood exactly what they were doing and did it anyway. The next time you walk through a museum, and I hope you do, stop in front of one of these statues. Look at the nose, or where the nose used to be, and know that what you're looking at isn't just damage, it isn't just time. It's the mark of someone who lived thousands of years ago, who understood something about identity and power and memory that was worth acting on. History isn't just what's preserved, it's also what was destroyed. And sometimes the destruction tells you more than the preservation ever could. That's what Codex Obscura is here for.